I mean, I was at this time, I was working, a pretty steady flow of gigs, freelancing, Lee Castle bands, stuff like that. I wasn't doing the circus yet when it came to Philly, but different things like that, little shots in the theater, this and that, all kinds of like miscellaneous type gigs. But I started going up to see Roy more often now that I was about 70 miles away. But, I mean, I could go up even as often as once a week. I mean, it wasn't always like that, but I don't know, 15, 20 times a year, let's say. I'm not sure. I'm just pulling numbers out of my head, but that's basically it. Now we're starting at like fall of 76. What I was doing, basically, I was going to take the things that I learned to do with Roy, and I wanted to, just get into it deeper and deeper and deeper. So sort of unwittingly, I started to exaggerate everything. I started to take the good principles and start to overdo everything. But of course, I still had to play my gigs too. So I had the way that I was already playing, which was probably overall the way I just should have stayed. But who knew that then? So when I'd be playing a gig, I would be, my normal embouchure. But then when I would be practicing, wow, it was kind of the same embouchure, except, like, back to that idea of, let's say, pushing forward with your jaw or something like that. Well, I started to overdo it. Start to do everything. If he said keep your teeth open, well, I kept, he talked like a fixed jaw position. Well, it was like I it was like I had it cast in cement. Of course, it's not supposed to be that fixed. None of this stuff, like I said. So I started to exaggerate everything in my practice. But then, so I had these two different embouchures going on. I mean, now this I thought this was going to last, just a couple months or so, like it had when I went through something a little similar. What would have been maybe, I don't know, 4 years before that, roughly. It didn't work out that way. So this let's call it an experiment or practice study regimen started to drag on months and months. And so it was like embouchure schizophrenia, like you had the way that worked, but then there was the way that I was trying to adopt, to the point also, like if I was switching, I started trying to, sneak this new embouchure in on gigs, like, just any place I could find, maybe where I wasn't going to get so exposed or anything like that. And that ended up, I had to move the tuning slide. Like, in other words, this new way of doing things, I played like really sharp and too edgy and all that. So I had to pull the tuning slide out, I don't know, quarter inch or something. And then, of course, if I wanted to play something and go back to the embouchure, probably the right embouchure, then I have to push the tuning slide back in, again. And of course, all of this eventually started, it drove me crazy. It's no way to operate at all. This went through, 77, 78. I had a real good Burt Bacharach tour in the summer of 78, about 6 weeks or so. It was really good and all that. Coming into 79, like early 79, somewhere in there, is where I got tired of the switching back and forth between one embouchure and another embouchure. And I said to myself, if you're going to do the new one, you're just going to have to stay totally on that and make it work, which, this is sort of a minor turning point between other turning points. Basically, in hindsight, like making a wrong turn when you're driving the car, taking the wrong exit ramp. Like I said, this is early 79, something like that. With this other way of playing, I could be really strong. I mean, fatigue and all that just didn't come into, and my setup could withstand a lot of pounding and a lot of punishment. So, so it didn't break down or anything like that, but it just sounded like hell. And all kinds of accuracy problems, and all kinds of, I couldn't even hit the tuning note B flat on the nose the first time. I couldn't hit any note on the first try. I mean, and of course I kept still working and all that, and needless to say, the longer this went on, the different contractors and all, well, everybody heard it. And, so I started getting left off gigs and stuff like that because of it. Not totally. I did a Stanley Clark tour in the summer and fall of that same year, 79. And the stuff that I was going through with my Embouchure, it didn't really interfere with playing that gig. That, of course, that was kind of a more of like a rock band situation, and just the kind of horn parts we had and all that, and the volume that everything was. Accuracy wasn't really too much of a problem there. So, it was, as far as straight ahead pounding, it was okay. But still, I mean, if I was going to do anything that involved any kind of finesse or whatever, that was just out the window. So that's you know, late 79, all through 1980 was the same thing. 81, 80 and 81, somewhere in there is where I started doing Ringling Brothers Circus when it would come into Philadelphia. And so this is kind of like what I said a couple of minutes ago, where that was a real brutal show, like all the blowing and all that. Well, with this new setup I had, well, it wasn't new anymore. It didn't matter. I could do the 3 shows, a 6-pack they called it, Saturday and Sunday. 6 shows in 2 days. It didn't matter, and I could go out and sit in a jazz club after all that, and maybe even have nothing but air coming out the horn, and so what? I could still, it still didn't break down. But I mean, finesse, forget it. It's gone. I got to a point in the middle of 1982 where I was taking some lessons with this guy named Dennis Sandoli in Philadelphia, more like about writing and arranging and theory and blowing solos and stuff like that. And his lessons were very difficult, the stuff you had to work on, and my chops were so screwed up that I couldn't devote the right amount of time to the lesson, because I had to spend so much time just messing with my chops. I was practicing 4 to 10 hours a day, every day, playing along with recordings. And like I said, fatigue was never a problem. But, finesse and control, or having a nice sound, well, that was a problem. We're going into the middle of 82, and I was getting pretty disgusted and thinking something's got to give here. This just can't go on like this. And I had started working like a part-time day gig. It was coming into the middle of 82, and it's time for the circus to come in. And, I thought I was going to get called for the circus, and then find out I didn't get called for the circus. And that like turned my head around. And I said, this, I got to put the horn down now. This is, I got to take a break here, and and at least temporarily quit all this, because it's just a downward spiral. And when the day after I made that decision, the phone rang, and the guy was calling me to do the circus. And because when I was talking to him on the phone, my first reaction was I quit. But then when he when he offered me the gig, I said, okay, I'll take it. It was like a couple weeks away. I hung up the phone with him, and I said, well, I guess I unretired. So this is another turning point. One final word. So what was I going to do? Well, the plan was, okay, try to find your old way of playing. Try to get, now this was already 6 years down this road here, and maybe a good 3 years after I had completely chucked the old good way of playing. But I could see that what I was doing was just, it was only getting worse. So I stopped going to see Roy Stevens. I took maybe one lesson with one or two lessons with Reinhardt again. Hadn't seen him in a long time. And I took a lesson with Carmine Caruso. But I got to this turning point, like I said, okay, I got to put the horn down, get away from these teachers, You know, they're great. They're all great guys, but you know, it's up to me now. And but then the phone rang the next day, and I unretired and took the gig at the circus. And so that's another turning point.